he hurt a lot. Note to self, taser to the neck equals insta-win. The first thing he became aware of were the hands gripping his arms, holding him up. His hands were cuffed behind him. Slowly he opened his eyes and tried to get a good look at his situation without being noticed. 2 sets of feet on either side of him, solid undecorated room, and there were probably some sentries or guards behind him. Couldn't tell if he was in a ship or not. The sound of a door opening behind him let him know where to book it the moment he had the chance. "Is he awake yet?" "Yes," said the gruff voice above him. How had they known? Lance sighed. He really needed to get his mojo back. When he was a kid, he could do all sorts of things. Now it seemed that he'd have to regain all those talents back. He looked up to see the witch. The name escaped him. Something like Haggle or Graggle. She walked to the opposite wall and pulled out a panel from the wall. It was an indented table with many glowing vials and other instruments crowding the top. "Bring the first one," she ordered, and someone left. "Okay, Lance, how are we going to play this game?" "So, Haggy," he said sweetly, "if you wanted to see me, you could have just sent me love letters like all the others. There was no need to be pushy." It was like he wasn't even there. She continued to organize her things. Even the guards holding him didn't acknowledge that he had spoken. Different angle, then. "So what do you want?" Still no reaction. "Look," he said, trying to reason, "if we're going to play hostage and captor, you're going to have to work with me here." Not even a glance in his direction. If they were going to ignore him, they could have just put him in a cell, right? When the sentry came back, Lance's world came to an end. "Mom? Lance, baby!" She was disheveled and still wearing her apple apron. She looked like she'd been crying for a while. "You bitch!" He attempted to launch himself at the witch, but the guard grabbed a handful of his hair and shoved him back down. He continued to shout insults and threats. The witch remained unfazed and proceeded to inject a small amount of glowing yellow liquid into his mother's arm. The effect was immediate and horrific. It was over in minutes. Where his mother had knelt was now a simmering pile of fine kinetic ash. Lance could only stare. The longer he did, the harder it was to process what had just occurred. One moment she was there, and in less time than it took to boil an egg, she was gone. He heard the door open behind him again, followed by intense crying. His little brother was dragged forward, and the witch turned to him with another needle. "No, no, 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 hey!" Lance's voice shook. "What do you want to know? I'll tell you anything you want. I'll do anything you want. Anything!" Shouting at a brick wall would have had more effect. It took even less time for his ash to be added to his mother's. The door opened again. "Hey, Lancelot!" "Sissy!" His big sister walked in by herself. She'd always been the strongest with the biggest attitude. As she walked to the front of the room, she talked like he was still at the garrison, and this was simply a weekend phone conversation. "So, we got your video. That old guy gave it to us and said that you were off fighting bad guys." She smirked. "Looks like the bad guys are fighting back as well." "Sissy, please." "You know, if you'd wanted to fight bad guys, there are plenty of bad guys back on Earth," she laughed. "You know, those politicians will make deals with the devil himself." As the witch injected the liquid into his sister, she gave Lance a stern look and said, "I think it's time you took off those kitty gloves." Lance sat in his cell and contemplated how time worked while you were in jail. Was it like being in the shower where time was slower than it seemed? Or was it more like playing outside where it goes faster? Unlike the prisons the Galra usually had, these were made of bars and metal, slats so he could see out into the cells next to his. As far as he could tell, there was only one other prisoner in the area. The other one was a Galra located in the cell to his left. Lance had tried to talk to him, but the Galra didn't answer. He must have been there for a while because his clothes were barely holding on at the seams. The poor guy had actually tied parts of his clothing together with knots. When the witch entered his cell, Lance adopted his best smirk. "How'd you find out the champion was a clone?" she asked. Lance laughed outright. "Answer my question." She bared her teeth. "Make me," Lance said. He no longer had anything to lose. This hag had made sure of that. The sentries reached down and hauled him to his feet. "What are you going to do?" he sneered. "Cut my leg off?" "I have a separate use for you," was her only answer. They carried him to a room that reminded him forcefully of a dentist's office. It even had the chair. The table beside it was cluttered with labeled bottles. On the other side sat a Galra with a screen in front of him. He was strapped into the chair, and the witch chose a bottle from the table. "Start with this one and continue down the list," she instructed the sitting Galra. "I want meticulous documents." "Yes, ma'am." The Galra saluted and took the bottle. "Nothing will be left out." "I've wondered for a while what would happen to a human body if given Galra drugs and poison," she said. "You have nothing to give in the way of intelligence, and I've watched you fight. You hold no value as a weapon. In my observations, you are the weakest member of Voltron. So how is it that you knew the champion was a fake when no one else knew?" Lance shrugged. It just sort of made sense that Shiro was fake, but the witch thought he had a strategy or something. So he gave a coy smile. "Who knows?" "You will tell me how you found out. What was it that gave him away?" "Ah, so she just wants to perfect her disguise, as if I'm going to help her with that." "Look, I really don't know," he said. "I just kind of figured it out. I mean, something felt wrong right off the bat, and when the Black Line didn't accept him back right away, but then little things after that." "Like what?" "I don't know. It's hard to pinpoint any one specific thing." She hissed and left the room. Now all he had to do was wait. Surely she'll try to change things with the fake, and the others will figure it out. And with that taken care of, he could now focus on his next plan of action. "I thought you talked to him," Hunk said nervously. "I tried to," Keith snapped. "There's a difference." "He can't stay in his room forever," Allura said, taking a deep breath. "I understand that losing one of our own is painful, to say the least, but we can't let it stop us. Lance would be furious." "He might be flattered, actually," Pidge responded, "but we really should get back out there." She and Hunk had some things that they had to investigate. They had spent a lot of time with their heads together trying to figure out why Lance would have left. They even, just between the two of them, held out the wild hope that if they solved it, then Lance would come back. Right now, though, they were just standing in front of Shiro's room. He had taken one look at the paladin armor in Hunk's hands and booked it out of the bridge. It had been almost 4 days since. "I know they had that fight, but I thought they made up." Curran looked at Pidge, who nodded. "Yeah, I told Lance he should go and apologize, and when I saw him next, he told me that everything was cool. I mean, they talked and looked okay at dinner." Hunk nodded in agreement. "The fact that they were fighting is weird," Keith said. This time everyone nodded. It was one thing when Shiro snapped at Lance, but when Lance snapped back, and with a vengeance, it took everyone by surprise. "Come to think of it, Lance has acted weird ever since you left, Keith." "What, you think 'cause I wasn't around for him to get pissed off at, he took it out on Shiro?" "No," Hunk said. "I'm saying that he was acting weird for a long time before he yelled at Shiro, and the fact that I'm just noticing it now makes me a terrible friend." He trailed off, and Pidge handed him a tissue. It was now standard gear to have tissues ready. It hadn't escaped any of them how much they had not realized while Lance was there. "Don't worry about it, Hunk," Pidge said. She was practically tormented by the unasked question Lance had wanted to ask her before, but didn't because she'd yelled at him instead. "You weren't a bad friend." "I'm going to try again," Keith said. "You guys try to do what you can." It was a weak alternative to a solid plan of action, but it was all they had. Shiro was sitting at the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, and head down with his hands clasped tightly in front of him. He hadn't changed clothes or moved from that spot since day one. "Come on, Shiro," Keith said, this time sitting down in front of him on the floor. "We need you." He didn't move, and Keith grimaced. His friend looked like he'd aged 50 years, and he had no idea how to snap him out of it. "Keith," Shiro's voice was small, but Keith leaned forward, eager to hear. What am I going to tell his family?" Keith froze. I've been trying to think of what to tell them, how to tell them. They would have just gotten his message from Sam saying he's all right, and now he's gone. The boy swallowed hard and tried not to panic. I really thought I could get you all back." Keith reached out and hugged him, just like Shiro did when he was younger. "Shiro, I have no idea. I'm not good with people when it's good news that needs to be shared. But I'm sure if you ask one of the others, they can help you. No one is asking you to do this by yourself." "But—" "No buts, Shiro," Keith said. "Butts are for chairs." Shiro leaned back and looked in shock at Keith, who shrugged. "I'm sure Lance would not want you to be this hung up over his death. Even though Pidge said that Lance would be flattered to see everyone this depressed about him, I'm sure it would have stopped being flattering about 2 days ago." Shiro nodded. He took a moment longer to let what Keith said sink in, and to shake off the funk he'd been in. Keith sat there in case something else might come up. "All right," Shiro sighed. "But let me clean up, and I'll be out later, okay?" Keith nodded and stood to leave. "Just," Shiro added quickly, "you don't have to take Lance's place with the poor jokes. Yours are actually worse." Keith rolled his eyes. "Yeah, whatever."